Little girl found crying under the bridge. Officer freezes at the scene and calls 911. Before we start the story, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from, follow our channel, and don't miss emotional stories every day. Enjoy the story. The morning air hung heavy beneath the old Jefferson Bridge on the outskirts of St. Louis. Officer James Monroe's breath formed small clouds as he made his routine patrol, flashlight beam cutting through the early mist rising from the river. 27 years on the force, just 2 weeks from retirement, and still walking the same routes, checking the forgotten spaces where the city preferred not to look. A sound stopped him mid-step. Not the usual scurrying of animals or the distant rumble of traffic overhead, but something distinctly human. A small whimper echoing against concrete walls. "Hello?" Monroe called, directing his flashlight toward the source. "Police officer, anyone there?" For a moment silence answered him. Then a movement caught his eye. A tiny figure huddled against a concrete pillar, clutching what appeared to be a tattered teddy bear. A child, alone, under a bridge. Monroe approached slowly, keeping his voice gentle. "Hey there, I'm Officer Monroe. Are you hurt?" He knelt, maintaining a respectful distance as the little girl, no more than 6 or 7, looked up with wide, fearful eyes. "Something's moving inside me," she whispered, her small hand pressing against her stomach. "It won't stop." Monroe hesitated, uncertainty crossing his weathered features. In nearly 3 decades of police work, he'd heard many strange things, but the girl's words combined with her matter-of-fact delivery sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What's your name?" he asked, noticing how thin her jacket was for the October chill. "Ellie," she replied, voice echoing slightly under the bridge. As she shifted, Monroe noticed a disheveled man lying motionless several feet away. "Is that your dad, Ellie?" Monroe gestured toward the man. She shook her head. "He takes care of me. Sometimes. But he's been sleeping a long time." Monroe radioed for backup and medical assistance, keeping his tone even despite the urgency. "Dispatch. I need medical at the east side of Jefferson Bridge. Adult male unconscious and—" He paused, looking at the child's pale face. "A minor. Requiring medical attention." "Copy that, Officer Monroe. EMS en route, 5 minutes out." Monroe removed his jacket and gently placed it around the girl's shoulders. "Help is coming, Ellie." "Am I in trouble?" Her voice trembled, eyes darting toward the approaching sirens. "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble." Monroe's hand hovered uncertainly before he finally reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm going to help you, okay?" Something deep within him, something he thought had hardened years ago, softened as her small hand tentatively reached for his. In her eyes, he saw not just fear, but a weariness no child should know. "It hurts most at night," she whispered. "The moving inside." As sirens grew louder, Monroe made a decision that would alter the course of many lives, including his own. "I'll handle this one personally," he told the arriving officers. Surprising even himself. He couldn't explain why this case felt different. Perhaps it was the girl's haunting words, or her too old eyes. Perhaps it was the approaching end of his career. Or perhaps it was the memory of another child he'd failed to protect long ago. His own daughter, now estranged. Whatever the reason, as the ambulance doors closed with Ellie inside, Officer James Monroe knew one thing with absolute certainty. This little girl would not disappear into the system, not on his watch. The fluorescent lights of St. Louis Memorial Hospital buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow that made Ellie look even smaller in the oversized hospital bed. Officer Monroe stood in the doorway, watching as a nurse checked the girl's vital signs. He'd stayed long past the end of his shift, something his captain would surely notice. "Officer, can I speak with you?" Dr. Chen, a young physician, with kind eyes and an air of determined efficiency, gestured toward the hallway. Once outside, she lowered her voice. "We've done some preliminary tests. There's definitely an abdominal abnormality, but we need more specialized scans to determine exactly what we're dealing with." And the man found, with her? Monroe asked. "Severe malnutrition and exposure." He's stabilized but confused. Keeps asking about a little girl, though he can't seem to remember her name. Dr. Chen glanced through the window at Ellie. Do we know anything about her? Monroe opened a small notebook. Her name is Ellie. That's all I've got so far. I'm waiting for records to come through. No last name. She doesn't seem to know it, Monroe admitted. Or she's afraid to tell me. Dr. Chen's pager beeped. I have to go. The social worker should be here soon. She hesitated before adding, Officer, children like Ellie, they often fall through the cracks. Our system isn't designed for complicated cases. Monroe nodded grimly. I know the system, Doctor. All too well. Left alone, Monroe returned to Ellie's bedside. Her eyes fluttered open when he sat down. You stayed, she whispered, surprise evident in her voice. I said I would, Monroe replied softly. How are you feeling? Tired. Her small fingers twisted the edge of the hospital blanket. Is the moving inside me bad? Monroe chose his words carefully. The doctors are trying to figure that out. Can you tell me more about it? Ellie's face scrunched in concentration. It's like swimming, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, mostly at night. She looked up suddenly. Will they take it out? If something needs to come out, the doctors will help with that, Monroe assured her. Ellie, can you tell me about your family? Where's your mom? The girl's expression closed immediately. Gone away. A long time. And the man under the bridge? Uncle Michael. Not really my uncle, she explained with a child's logic. He forgets things. Sometimes he forgets me. Monroe was about to ask another question when a brisk knock interrupted. A woman. A crisp pantsuit entered, clipboard in hand. Officer Monroe. I'm Sandra Winters, Department of Family Services. Her eyes swept over him and Ellie with professional assessment. I understand we have an unidentified minor. Her name is Ellie, Monroe said, standing. I'm waiting on background. Information. Ms. Winters nodded, already typing on her tablet. I'll take it from here. We'll place her in emergency foster care once she's medically cleared. Wait, Monroe interjected. There's something medically wrong with her. She needs specialized care. We'll make sure she gets appropriate medical attention, Ms. Winters replied, her tone making it clear this was routine. These cases have protocols, officer. As they spoke, Monroe's phone buzzed with an incoming database report. What he read made his jaw tighten. Ellie Thompson, age 6, he said quietly. 5 different foster placements in 3 years. Last guardian reported her missing 8 months ago. Ms. Winters sighed. Another system child. Monroe looked back at Ellie, who was watching them with those 2 old eyes. In them he saw a flicker of resignation. She'd been handed off before, passed around like an unwanted package. I'd like to be kept informed about her case, Monroe said, surprising himself. That's not standard procedure, officer. Ms. Winters raised an eyebrow. Make an exception. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. As Monroe gathered his things to leave, Ellie called out, her voice small but clear. Will you come back? The question hung in the air, heavy with hope and doubt. Monroe felt something shift inside him, a door long closed creaking open. Yes, Ellie. I'll come back. Walking to his car, Monroe's phone rang. His captain's name flashed on screen. Monroe, he answered. James, what's this I hear about you getting involved with a child case? You're 2 weeks from retirement. Don't complicate things now. Monroe watched the hospital lights glowing against the night sky. Some complications find you, Captain, he replied. Not the other way. Around. True to his word, Officer Monroe returned to the hospital the next morning, carrying a small paper bag. He found Ellie sitting up in bed, listlessly pushing around breakfast food on her tray. Her face brightened when she saw him. You really came back, she said, wonder in her voice. I brought something for your friend, Monroe replied, pulling out a tiny blue sweater sized perfectly for her teddy bear. Thought he might be cold. Ellie's eyes widened as she accepted the gift, carefully dressing the worn bear. His name is Theo, she confided. as if sharing a precious secret. "Thank you." Monroe settled into the chair beside her bed. "Has the doctor been in this morning?" Ellie nodded. "The nice lady doctor. She put a cold circle thing on my tummy and listened. Then some people came and took pictures inside me." She frowned slightly. "They said I was brave, but I was scared." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Monroe explained gently. "It means doing what you need to do even when you are scared." A knock interrupted their conversation as Dr. Chen entered, accompanied by another physician, older with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "Officer Monroe, this is Dr. Patel, our pediatric specialist," Dr. Chen introduced them. "We've reviewed Ellie's initial scans." Dr. Patel nodded professionally. "Perhaps we could speak outside?" Monroe followed the doctors into the hallway, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. "Ellie has a significant abdominal mass," Dr. Patel explained without preamble. "It appears to be a rare congenital condition that should have been treated years ago. The movement she feels is likely fluid displacement as the mass shifts against her other organs." "Is it?" Monroe couldn't bring himself to say the word that frightened adults most. "Not cancerous, no," Dr. Patel clarified, "but concerning nonetheless. She needs specialized treatment from a pediatric surgical team at Children's Medical Center." "Then let's transfer her," Monroe said. The doctors exchanged glances. "It's not that simple," Dr. Chen explained. "Without proper insurance or guardian authorization, arranging specialized care becomes complicated. She's in the system. The state is her guardian," Monroe argued. "Yes, and state cases require approvals, evaluations, and paperwork," Dr. Patel said, frustration evident, despite his professional tone. "The system moves slowly, Officer Monroe. Medicine sometimes can't wait." As if summoned by the conversation, Ms. Winters from Family Services appeared at the nurse's station, tablet in hand. "Officer Monroe," she greeted him, surprise evident in her voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Any progress on Ellie's placement?" Monroe asked directly. Ms. Winters sighed. "I've made dozens of calls. Her condition complicates things. Most foster homes aren't equipped for children with significant medical needs." Monroe felt a familiar frustration building, the same feeling he'd encountered countless times over his career when systems designed to help became barriers instead. "What about her previous guardians?" he pressed. "Most were temporary placements. The last one—" Ms. Winters checked her tablet. "A Mrs. Greaves reported Ellie ran away, but neighbors suggested she actually left the child with a relative before moving states with a new boyfriend. And that relative would be the man under the bridge," Monroe concluded grimly. "Michael Greaves, brother of Ellie's last foster mother," Ms. Winters confirmed. "Currently being treated for exposure and malnourishment in this same hospital." Monroe rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of Ellie's precarious situation. "So, what happens now?" "She'll go to an emergency placement facility until we can find a suitable foster home," Ms. Winters replied. "Meanwhile, we'll begin the authorization process." "For her medical treatment. How long will that take?" Ms. Winters didn't meet his eyes. "Hard to say, weeks possibly." "She doesn't have weeks," Dr. Chen interjected. "This condition is progressive." Monroe looked through the doorway at Ellie, who sat quietly talking to her newly clothed Teddy. Bare, unaware of the bureaucratic battle being waged over her care. "There has to be a way to expedite this," he insisted. "Officer Monroe," Ms. Winters lowered her voice. "Your concern is admirable, but you're retiring soon. This isn't your problem to solve." Something in her words struck a nerve, echoing similar ones he'd said himself over the years when distancing himself from difficult cases, including, he realized with a pang, from his own daughter's struggles. "I'm making it my problem," he said quietly, determination hardening in his chest. "Now who do I need to call to get this child the treatment she needs?" Behind him, his phone buzzed with a text message. Glancing down, Monroe's heart skipped a beat at the name on the screen. Emma. His daughter. After 3 years of silence, The message read simply, "Dad, we need to talk." The past and present collided as Monroe stood in that sterile hallway, caught between the child who needed him now and the one he had failed before. Monroe sat in his car outside the hospital, staring at his phone. Emma's text message glowed on the screen, 5 simple words that carried the weight of years of silence. "Dad, we need to talk." His finger hovered over the reply button, uncertainty freezing him in place. What could he possibly say after all this time? A tap on the window startled him. Dr. Chen stood outside, hugging her coat against the autumn chill. "Sorry to disturb you, officer," she said when he rolled down the window. "I'm heading home and saw you sitting here." "Just thinking," Monroe replied, quickly pocketing his phone. Dr. Chen's expression softened. "About Ellie?" "Among other things." Monroe sighed. "Any progress on her case?" "That's actually why I wanted to catch you." Dr. Chen glanced around before continuing. "I've sent her files to a colleague at Children's Medical Center. Unofficially, of course. Dr. Harriet Reed, one of the best pediatric specialists in the Midwest. She's willing to review Ellie's case." Hope flickered in Monroe's chest. "That could help expedite things." "Possibly. Having an expert advocate makes a difference." Dr. Chen hesitated. "There's something else. Michael Greaves, the man found with Ellie. He's more lucid today. He's been asking for her." Monroe checked his watch. Visiting hours were nearly over, but his badge could still get him in. "I should talk to him." Michael Greaves looked significantly better than when Monroe had found him unconscious under the bridge. Clean-shaven and with proper nutrition flowing through his IV, the man appeared perhaps 10 years younger, though his eyes retained a haunted quality. "You found Ellie," he said when Monroe entered. Not a question, but a statement of relief. "Yes." Monroe took a seat beside the bed. "I need to understand your relationship to her." Michael nodded slowly. "My sister Carol was her foster mother. When Carol met that new boyfriend," his expression darkened, "she said she couldn't handle Ellie anymore. Was going to return her to the state, but I couldn't let that happen to the kid. Not again. So you took her in." Monroe kept his tone neutral despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "I know how it looks," Michael said, his voice breaking. "Former military. Honorable. Discharge. Then my wife left, I lost my job, eventually my house, but I never—" He looked up, eyes fierce with dignity. "I never abandoned Ellie. We stayed together. I made sure she ate, even when I didn't." "She needs serious medical treatment," Monroe said. "Something's been wrong for a long time." Michael's face crumpled. "I know. She would cry at night saying something was moving inside her. I took her to the free clinic once, but they said it was just anxiety, maybe parasites. Gave us deworming medication that didn't help." His hands twisted the thin hospital blanket. "I failed her." Monroe studied the man before him. Not a villain, but someone who had himself fallen through society's cracks, yet still tried to protect a child when others wouldn't. "You kept her alive," Monroe said quietly. "That's something." Later that evening, Monroe found himself standing in Ellie's hospital room, watching her sleep. The steady beep of monitors provided a rhythmic backdrop to his thoughts. "Officer Monroe?" A night nurse appeared in the doorway. "Visiting hours ended 2 hours ago." "I know. Just checking on her before I go." Monroe gently adjusted Ellie's blanket where it had slipped down. The nurse's expression softened. "She asked about you earlier. Wanted to know if you'd come back tomorrow." "What did you tell her?" "That you seemed like a man who keeps his promises." The nurse smiled. "Was I right?" Monroe nodded, looking down at Ellie's peaceful face, so different from the frightened child he'd found under the bridge. "Yes." As he walked through the quiet hospital corridors, Monroe's phone buzzed again. Emma following up on her earlier message. "I saw the news story about the little girl under the bridge. That was you, wasn't it?" Monroe stopped walking. Surprised. How had Emma connected him to Ellie? He typed back carefully, "Yes, how did you know?" Her reply came quickly, I work at Children's Medical Center. Administrative Department. Your name came up on a case referral today. Some things never change, do they, Dad? Always trying to save everyone. The subtle accusation in her words stung with truth. Monroe had dedicated his life to protecting strangers, while his own daughter had slipped away from him. As he drove home through the darkened streets of St. Louis, Monroe found his mind working through Ellie's puzzle. Her medical condition, her history in the system, the failure of various adults who should have protected her. It all painted a picture of institutional neglect that felt both familiar and infuriating. His career was ending in 2 weeks. His pension was secure if he stayed the course. Getting too involved now was risky, potentially messy. And yet, as he pulled into his driveway and looked at the empty, darkened house that had felt like a mausoleum since his wife died and Emma left, Monroe knew he couldn't walk away. Not from Ellie. And maybe, if he was very lucky, not from the possibility of reconnecting with his daughter either. Some bridges once burned seemed impossible to rebuild, but sometimes life gave you a second chance to try. Morning sunlight streamed through the hospital windows as Monroe arrived, carrying a small paper bag and a determined expression. He'd spent half the night researching Ellie's condition and making phone calls to old contacts who owed him favors. He found Dr. Chen updating Ellie's chart, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd worked through the night. "Any developments?" Monroe asked quietly, not wanting to wake Ellie, who was still asleep. "Doctor." Chen's tired face brightened slightly. "Actually, yes. Dr. Reed at Children's Medical Center has agreed to see Ellie tomorrow for a consultation. It's not a full admission yet, but it's a start." "How did you manage that?" Monroe asked, genuinely impressed. "Let's just say I called in some professional courtesies," Dr. Chen replied with a small smile. "And what about you? You look like a man with news." Monroe nodded. "I spoke with Judge Harrison. We go way back. He's agreed to expedite an emergency hearing on Ellie's case this afternoon. If it goes well, we might be able to fast-track her treatment authorization." A small sound from the bed interrupted them. Ellie was awake, clutching her teddy bear and watching them with those observant eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Good morning, Ellie," Monroe said, approaching her bedside. "I brought something for you." He pulled a children's book from the paper bag, The Little Engine That Could. Ellie accepted it reverently, running her small fingers over the colorful cover. "I don't know this one," she admitted. "It was my daughter's favorite when she was your age," Monroe explained, the memory both sweet and painful. "It's about not giving up even when things seem impossible." "Like the moving inside me?" Ellie asked, her hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen. Monroe nodded, sitting beside her. "Exactly. And guess what? You're going to see a special doctor tomorrow who knows all about helping with that." For the first time since he'd met her, Ellie's face lit up with a genuine smile, small and tentative but real. It transformed her features from weary resignation to the hopeful child she should have been all along. "Will you read it to me?" she asked, offering him the book. As Monroe began to read, Ms. Winters appeared in the doorway, her expression unusually positive. "Officer Monroe, a word?" She beckoned him outside. In the hallway, she showed him her tablet. "I've found a temporary foster placement willing to take Ellie with her medical condition, a retired nurse named Mrs. Porter. She has experience with special needs children." This was better news than Monroe had expected. "When?" "She can take Ellie as soon as she's medically cleared to leave. And," Ms. Winters continued, looking somewhat impressed, "I've been informed about the emergency hearing this afternoon. Your connections work fast." Monroe allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. Things were finally moving in the right direction. His phone buzzed with a text message. "I have a break at noon. Coffee at the hospital cafeteria. Emma." Monroe stared at the message, his heart pounding. After 3 years of silence, his daughter was willing to meet. Today, of all days. "Is everything all right?" Ms. Winters asked, noticing his expression. "Yes," Monroe said, a mixture of hope and anxiety swirling within him. I think it might be. The hospital cafeteria bustled with activity as Monroe sat nervously, watching the entrance. His coffee had gone cold, untouched while he waited for Emma. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days since they'd last spoken. Not that he was counting. When she finally appeared, the sight of her knocked the air from his lungs. Emma had her mother's eyes and his stubborn chin, now framed by short professional hair instead of the rebellious style she'd worn when they'd last argued. She spotted him immediately, hesitating before approaching his table. "Dad," she said simply, sliding into the chair across from him. "Emma." His voice came out rougher than intended. "You look good." An awkward silence stretched between them, years of unspoken words forming an invisible barrier. "So," Emma finally said, "the girl under the bridge, that was your case?" Monroe nodded. "Ellie, she's 6, has a serious medical condition that went untreated. I know, I saw her file cross my desk yesterday." Emma stirred her coffee methodically. "A congenital hydrocele, rare but treatable. If it had been caught years ago, it would have been a simple procedure. But now," Emma's professional demeanor slipped slightly, "now it's complicated, expensive, and requires specialized aftercare." She studied him carefully. "You're retiring in what, 2 weeks? Why get tangled in this now?" The question hit its mark. "Some things find you at the right moment," Monroe answered quietly. "Or the wrong one." Emma's eyes flashed with old hurt. "Like when I needed you." "That was definitely the wrong moment, wasn't it?" Monroe winced but didn't look away. "I made mistakes, Emma, many of them." Before she could respond, Monroe's phone rang, the judge's chambers. "I have to take this," he apologized, stepping away from the table. The conversation was brief but devastating. "I'm sorry, James," Judge Harrison said. "The hearing's been postponed. Budget cuts have reduced court schedules, and since the child is currently stable and housed, her case has been pushed back 3 weeks." 3 weeks? Monroe's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. "She doesn't have 3 weeks, William. My hands are tied, unless there's an immediate life-threatening emergency." "By then it could be," Monroe interrupted, but the judge had already hung up. When Monroe returned to the table, Emma could read the outcome on his face. "Bad news?" she asked. "The hearing's delayed 3 weeks." Monroe ran a hand over his face. By then, Ellie's condition could deteriorate significantly. Emma was quiet for a moment, then opened her tablet. "Let me see what I can find out." Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. "The insurance approval process is stalled because she's between foster placements and—" Emma stopped suddenly, her expression darkening. "Wait, this can't be right." "What is it?" "Ellie's last 3 medical appointments were canceled by her foster mother. The last pediatrician noted concerns about her abdominal complaints but couldn't complete an evaluation." Emma looked up, professional indignation clear on her face. Someone dropped the ball. Multiple someones. Monroe's phone rang again. Dr. Chen. The moment he answered, he knew something was wrong. "Ellie's condition has deteriorated," she said without preamble. "She's running a fever and the pain has increased. We need to move her to Children's Medical Center now, not tomorrow." Monroe's eyes met Emma's across the table. "I'll be right there." As he stood to leave, Emma made a surprising decision. "I'm coming with you." In the elevator riding up to Ellie's floor, Monroe faced the stark reality of his situation. "If I push this through unofficial channels, I could lose my pension. If I don't, Ellie could lose much more." Emma studied her father's troubled face. "You always said follow the rules. That's what separates us from chaos. That's what you told me when I needed flexibility most." The elevator doors opened to reveal a flurry of activity around Ellie's room. Doctors, nurses, and a very distressed Ms. Winters. "The foster placement fell through," she informed Monroe as he approached. "Mrs. Porter had a family emergency. And now with Ellie's condition worsening." Monroe watched through the window as Dr. Chen gently examined a pale, frightened Ellie. "If I give her up, she dies in the system," Monroe murmured, more to himself than anyone else. If I stay with her, I lose everything I've worked for. To his surprise, Emma placed a hand on his arm. The first voluntary contact in years. "So which is it going to be, Dad?" she asked quietly. "I'm staying with her," Monroe said, the decision solidifying within him like concrete setting. Rules exist to protect people. If they're hurting someone instead, then something's wrong with the rules, not the person. Emma's eyebrows rose slightly, surprised to hear such words from her by-the-book father. Before she could respond, Dr. Chen emerged from Ellie's room. "We need to transfer her to Children's Medical Center immediately," she explained. "I've arranged an ambulance, but without proper authorization." "I'll handle the authorization," Emma interrupted, her administrative expertise suddenly valuable. "Give me 20 minutes and your fax number." She turned to Monroe. "This buys us time, not solutions. We still need to navigate the system." Monroe nodded gratefully as Emma hurried away, phone already pressed to her ear. Inside her room, Ellie looked smaller than ever, curled around her teddy bear. Her face brightened slightly when she saw Monroe. "You came back again," she whispered. "I promised, didn't I?" Monroe sat beside her, noticing the sheen of fever on her forehead. "Ellie, the doctors need to take you to a special hospital where they can help with the moving inside you. I'll be right there with you, okay?" Ellie studied his face with that too-old gaze. People always say they'll stay. Then they don't. The simple truth in her words struck Monroe like a physical blow. How many times had adults failed this child? How many promises had been broken, including his own promise to Emma years ago that he would always be there for her? "This time is different," Monroe assured her, gently smoothing her tangled hair. "I'm not leaving." When the transport team arrived, Monroe rode in the ambulance with Ellie, holding her small hand as they navigated through traffic toward Children's Medical Center. The city passed by outside the windows, the same streets he'd patrolled for decades, now seen from a completely different perspective. At the hospital, Emma was waiting for them, clipboard in hand, looking every inch the efficient administrator she had become. "I've expedited the intake process," she informed them. "Dr. Reed will see Ellie immediately. Dad, you'll need to sign these forms as her temporary guardian." Monroe hesitated, pen hovering over the papers. "I'm not her guardian. You are for the next 24 hours, Emma replied, a conspiratorial gleam in her eye. "Emergency temporary authorization. It's a loophole, but a legal one. I had Judge Harrison's clerk push it through." As Ellie was whisked away for tests, Monroe found himself alone with his daughter for the first time in years. "Why are you helping?" he finally asked. Emma's professional facade slipped, revealing the hurt beneath. "Because that little girl needs someone to break the rules for her." She met his gaze directly. "Like I needed once." The reference to their falling out hung in the air between them. 3 years ago, Emma had struggled with addiction after her mother's death. Monroe, rigid with grief himself, had tried to force her into recovery through ultimatums and tough love. The approach had backfired spectacularly, driving her away completely. "I was wrong," Monroe admitted, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "With you. I thought following protocol would save you. I didn't understand that sometimes love has to work outside the lines." Emma's eyes glistened, but before she could respond, Dr. Reed appeared, a tall, commanding presence with silver-streaked hair and compassionate eyes. "Mr. Monroe, I'm Dr. Reed. We've completed Ellie's initial assessment, and I'm afraid the situation is more urgent than we thought. The congenital condition has created pressure on several organs, which explains the pain and movement sensation she experiences. What can be done?" Monroe asked. "She needs surgery," Dr. Reed stated plainly. "And soon. The procedure is specialized and expensive." "How expensive?" Monroe asked, mentally calculating his savings. Dr. Reed named a figure that made his heart sink. Even liquidating his retirement account wouldn't cover half of it. "There has to be a way," Emma insisted, her administrative mind clearly working through possibilities. Dr. Reed's pager beeped. I need to check on Ellie. We'll talk options soon. She hurried away, leaving father and daughter facing an impossible situation. What now? Emma asked. Monroe looked down the hall where Ellie had disappeared, then back at his daughter. Two broken relationships, both needing repair. Now, he said with quiet determination, we find another bridge to cross. Rain pattered against the windows of Children's Medical Center, mirroring the somber mood inside. Monroe sat in an uncomfortable chair beside Ellie's bed, watching her fitful sleep. The specialized tests had confirmed Dr. Reed's assessment. Ellie's condition was critical and deteriorating. Down the hall, Emma worked the phones tirelessly, calling every contact in her administrative network, searching for funding options, charitable programs, anything that might help. The temporary emergency authorization would expire in hours, returning Ellie to bureaucratic limbo. Monroe's phone buzzed. His captain again, the fourth call today. He silenced it without answering. Whatever lecture awaited him about unauthorized involvement and retirement protocols could wait. Officer Monroe. A nurse appeared at the door. There's someone here to see you. To Monroe's surprise, it was Ms. Winters from Family Services, clutching her ever-present tablet. How did you find us? He asked, stepping into the hallway. It wasn't difficult, she replied, her usual bureaucratic demeanor softened by concern. How is she? Not good. She needs surgery soon, but there are complications. Ms. Winters nodded understanding. The system moves slowly, and children can't always wait. She hesitated, then added, I've been doing this job for 15 years, Officer Monroe. Some cases haunt you. I think Ellie will be one of mine. Something in her candor broke through Monroe's defensive wall. Mine too. I've made some calls, Ms. Winters offered. There's a medical grant program that might help, but the application process takes weeks, and without stable placement, Ellie's case becomes even more complicated. Monroe ran a hand over his face, fatigue settling deep in his bones. We don't have weeks. Just then Emma appeared, her expression a mix of frustration and determination. Dad, I've been on the phone with the hospital financial department. Even with emergency Medicaid, there's a substantial gap in coverage. Ms. Winters looked between them, recognition dawning. You're Emma Monroe? James's daughter? Emma nodded, surprised. Yes. Do we know each other? No, but your father spoke of you often during our previous cases together. Ms. Winters smiled slightly. He was very proud of your acceptance to nursing school. An awkward silence fell as Emma glanced at her father, who looked away, memories of their shattered plans heavy between them. I work in hospital administration now, Emma said finally. Their conversation was interrupted by a small cry from Ellie's room. Monroe rushed back in to find her awake and in pain, clutching her abdomen. It's moving more, she whimpered, and hurting. Dr. Reed arrived moments later, quickly assessing Ellie's condition. After a brief examination, she motioned for Monroe to join her in the hallway. The pressure is increasing, she explained gravely. We can't wait for the bureaucracy to catch up. She needs surgery within 48 hours, or the risk of permanent damage increases significantly. What about the cost? Monroe asked. First, let's save her. Then we'll figure out payment. Monroe appreciated her priorities, but knew hospitals couldn't operate on goodwill alone. I'll find a way. When Dr. Reed left, Monroe returned to find Ellie curled tightly around her teddy bear, tears streaming silently down her face. Without a word, he sat beside her and gently began untangling her hair with his fingers, something he used to do for Emma when she was sick as a child. My mom used to do that, Ellie whispered, her eyes closed. Do you remember her? Monroe asked softly. Ellie nodded slightly. She sang songs, but she got confused a lot. Then she was gone. Monroe continued the gentle motion, providing what comfort he could. I'm sorry, Ellie. Are you going to go away too? The question hung in the air, heavy with all the abandonments this child had endured. No, Monroe promised, though he had no idea how. He would keep that promise. Later that night, after Ellie had finally drifted into a medicated sleep, Monroe stepped outside the hospital. The rain had stopped, leaving the parking lot glistening under the streetlights. He sat heavily in his car, the events of the day crashing down on him. His career, his pension, his savings, all endangered by his involvement in Ellie's case. His captain had left increasingly stern messages, the last one threatening formal disciplinary action. And yet, walking away was unthinkable. For the first time in decades, James Monroe, officer, father, pillar of regulation and control, broke down. Alone in his car, he gripped the steering wheel as silent tears streamed down his face, the weight of both past and present failures threatening to crush him. "I'm going to fail her," he whispered to the empty car, "just like I failed Emma." Outside, the clouds parted briefly, revealing a sliver of moon above the hospital where two broken lives, one just beginning, one nearing its end, hung in precarious balance. Monroe awoke with a stiff neck, having fallen asleep in the hospital chair beside Ellie's bed. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting warm patterns across the floor. Ellie was still sleeping, her breathing more even than the night before. A gentle knock at the door revealed Emma, holding 2 coffee cups and wearing the same clothes as yesterday. "You stayed," Monroe observed, accepting the coffee gratefully. "So did you," Emma replied, her eyes softening as she looked at Ellie. "How is she this morning?" "The pain medication helped her sleep. Dr. Reed will be making rounds soon." They sat in companionable silence, the bitterness between them temporarily set aside by a common purpose. "Dad," Emma began hesitantly, "I've been thinking. There might be a way to help Ellie." Monroe's attention sharpened. "I'm listening. I have a friend in the hospital's publicity department. If we could get Ellie's story out there, a child found alone under a bridge, falling through the cracks of the system, it might generate community support." Monroe frowned. "You want to use her as a media story?" "No," Emma corrected firmly. "I want to use media to help her. There's a difference." Before Monroe could respond, his phone rang, his captain again. With a sigh, he finally answered. "Monroe, where the devil are you?" "Captain Davis." "Demanded? You've missed 2 shifts and a retirement planning meeting?" "I'm handling a special case, sir." "The bridge girl? That's not your case anymore. I've received complaints from family services about your continued involvement." Monroe's eyes flew to the doorway where Ms. Winters now stood, tablet in hand and an apologetic expression on her face. "I'll call you back, Captain," Monroe said, ending the call. To Ms. Winters he asked, "You filed a complaint against me?" "Not me," she clarified, entering the room. "My supervisor saw the emergency authorization forms with your signature. He's concerned about liability issues." She lowered her voice. "I'm here unofficially to warn you. They're sending someone to take custody of Ellie this afternoon." The news hit Monroe like a physical blow. "They can't move her. She needs surgery, which the department will authorize through proper channels," Ms. Winters explained, though her expression suggested she didn't believe it would happen quickly enough. A new voice joined the conversation. "Perhaps I can help with that." Michael Greaves stood in the doorway, looking remarkably better than when Monroe had found him under the bridge. "I've been discharged." Monroe studied the man carefully. Clean-shaven, dressed in donated clothes, Michael still carried the haunted look of someone who had seen too much hardship, but determination shone in his eyes. "My sister abandoned her responsibilities to Ellie," Michael said quietly. "I won't. I've spoken with a social worker about becoming her official foster parent." Ms. Winters looked surprised. "That's a lengthy process, Mr. Greaves. There are home inspections, background checks." "I know," he interrupted gently. "But I've been sober for 8 months now, before I ended up on the street. I was a paramedic. I have skills that could help with Ellie's medical needs." His voice cracked slightly. "She's the only family I have left." The sincerity in his words was unmistakable. Monroe felt a grudging respect growing for this man who, despite his own problems, was willing to step up for Ellie. Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Reed arriving with her medical team. After examining Ellie, who had awoken during their discussion, Dr. Reed's expression was grave. The latest scans show increased pressure. We need to schedule surgery within 24 hours, she announced. I've consulted with my team, and we're prepared to proceed once we receive authorization. Ms. Winters looked pained. The emergency authorization expires in 3 hours, without a legal guardian's consent or a court order. I have a suggestion, Emma interrupted, her administrative mind finding a path forward. Michael isn't Ellie's legal guardian yet, but he's her closest relative by affinity. If he petitions for emergency temporary guardianship, and we can get a sympathetic judge to sign off. Like Judge Harrison, Monroe added, already reaching for his phone. Exactly. Emma nodded. Meanwhile, I've spoken with the hospital's charitable foundation. They may be able to cover part of the procedure cost. For the first time in days, Monroe felt a flicker of hope. Looking around the room, he realized that an unlikely alliance had formed. A retiring police officer, his estranged daughter, a reformed homeless man, a compassionate social worker, and a determined doctor, all rallying around one small girl. Ellie watched them all with wide eyes, clutching her teddy bear. Are you all helping me? She asked, wonder in her voice. Yes, sweetheart, Monroe assured her, gently squeezing her hand. You're not alone anymore. The sunlight strengthened outside, burning away the morning mist, much like the fog of impossibility that had surrounded Ellie's case was beginning to clear. The next few hours unfolded in a flurry of activity. Judge Harrison, despite his busy docket, agreed to hear Michael's emergency guardianship petition by video conference that afternoon. Emma worked the phones relentlessly, navigating the hospital's charitable foundation process. Dr. Reed prepared her surgical team, optimistic they would receive authorization in time. Monroe stood at the window of Ellie's room, watching clouds gather on the horizon. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively. Officer Monroe? It was Michael, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Could I speak with you privately? In the hallway, Michael's composure faltered slightly. What if they deny my petition? My history. It's not exactly ideal for a guardian. Monroe considered his words carefully. The system prefers perfect paperwork over imperfect solutions, but Judge Harrison understands that children need people who care, not just people with spotless records. Michael nodded. Gratefully. There's something else you should know. I've been asking around about Ellie's condition. If I become her guardian, she'll need specialized care after surgery. I can't provide that living under a bridge. One step at a time, Monroe advised. First, we get the guardianship. Then the, surgery. We'll figure out the rest. Their conversation was interrupted by Ms. Winters hurrying toward them, her usual composed demeanor shaken. We have a problem. My supervisor is here with a court order to take immediate custody of Ellie and transfer her to County General Hospital. Monroe's stomach dropped. County General doesn't have pediatric specialists. I know, Ms. Winters replied grimly, but it's a state-approved facility for system children, unlike this private hospital. Through the window, Monroe could see a stern-looking man in a suit speaking with Ellie's nurses, clipboard in hand. That's Davidson, Ms. Winters explained. Department supervisor, by the book, no exceptions. Monroe's police instincts kicked in, assess the situation, identify options, act decisively. How long can you stall him? 10 minutes, maybe 15 if Dr. Reed intervenes on medical grounds. Do it, Monroe instructed, already pulling out his phone. I need to call Emma. Judge Harrison's face on the video conference screen looked concerned as he reviewed the emergency petition. This is highly irregular, processing a guardianship request this quickly. Your Honor, Emma Sue argued professionally. Ellie Thompson's condition requires immediate specialized care that can only be provided here at Children's Medical Center. Moving her now would significantly endanger her health. The judge reviewed the medical documentation that Dr. Reed had provided, And Mr. Greaves, you understand the responsibilities you're taking on? This child will require extensive medical care and support. Michael stood straight, dignity evident, despite his humble circumstances. Yes, Your Honor. Ellie deserves someone who will put her needs first. I intend to be that person. Judge Harrison seemed to be considering the petition when a commotion erupted in the hallway outside Ellie's room. Davidson had arrived with 2 uniformed officers to execute the transfer order. I'm sorry, sir, Dr. Reed was saying firmly, blocking the doorway. Moving this patient now would constitute a serious medical risk. I cannot allow it. The court order supersedes your medical opinion, Doctor, Davidson replied coldly. Monroe slipped into Ellie's room, where she sat up in bed, eyes wide with fear at the raised voices outside. What's happening? She asked, clutching her teddy bear tightly. Monroe sat beside her, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. Some people think you should go to a different hospital, but we're trying to keep you here with the doctors who know how to help you best. Ellie's small face crumpled. They're taking me away again, aren't they? Just like all the other times. The resignation in her voice, a child too familiar with being shuffled around, struck Monroe to his core. Before he could respond, the door opened and Davidson entered, flanked by the officers. Officer Monroe, Davidson nodded curtly. You're interfering in a family services case. Please step aside. One of the uniformed officers, a young man Monroe had trained years ago, looked uncomfortable with the situation, but remained professionally detached. At that moment, Emma burst into the room, tablet in hand, and triumph on her face. Stop everything, she announced. Judge Harrison has just granted emergency temporary guardianship to Michael Greaves. She thrust the tablet toward Davidson. The digital order was filed 30 seconds ago. Ellie legally cannot be moved without her guardian's consent. Davidson scanned the document, his expression darkening. This is highly irregular. I'll have to confirm with the judge directly. Please do, Emma replied confidently. While you're at it, you might want to review the hospital's assessment that moving Ellie constitutes a significant medical risk, opening the department to potential liability. The calculated mention of liability made Davidson pause. As a career bureaucrat, nothing frightened him more than potential lawsuits. Outside the window, thunder rumbled as the approaching storm reached the city. Inside, a different kind of storm was breaking. Not with destruction, but with the first rays of hope, penetrating the dark clouds that had surrounded Ellie's future. Rain pelted the hospital windows as Davidson retreated to make his calls, clearly unhappy, but unwilling to challenge a judge's order without confirmation. The room fell quiet, the only sounds being the steady beep of Ellie's monitors and the rumble of thunder outside. Did we win? Ellie asked in a small voice, looking between the adults with cautious hope. We've won a battle, Monroe explained gently, sitting beside her. There are still more ahead, but you have a lot of people fighting for you now. Michael stepped forward, hesitantly. As Ellie's newly appointed temporary guardian, he was suddenly thrust into a role he'd been filling unofficially for months, but now, with legal weight and responsibility. Ellie, do you remember what I promised you under the bridge? He asked softly. She nodded, her serious eyes fixed on his face. That you wouldn't leave me like the others did. That's right, Michael confirmed. And now it's official. The judge says I can be your guardian. That means I'm responsible for taking care of you, if that's okay with you. Instead of answering, Ellie held out her small hand to Michael. He took it carefully, as if being offered something infinitely precious. Dr. Reed entered the room, bringing the focused energy that seemed to surround her like an aura. I've reviewed the latest scans. We need to schedule surgery for tomorrow morning. She looked at Michael. As her guardian, I'll need your formal consent. While they discussed the procedure, Monroe stepped into the hallway where Emma waited, her professional composure momentarily set aside as she leaned against the wall, exhaustion evident in her posture. You were brilliant in there, Monroe told her quietly. Emma offered a tired smile. Hospital administration teaches you how to navigate bureaucracy, sometimes by using it against itself. Thank you for helping Ellie, even though Monroe trailed off, unsure how to address the complicated history between them. Even though it meant working with you, Emma finished, a hint of their old tension returning. I'm not doing it for you, Dad. I'm doing it for her. Monroe nodded, accepting the boundary. Either way, you may have saved her life today. Their conversation was interrupted by Ms. Winters, who approached with uncharacteristic excitement. I have news. The hospital's charitable foundation has approved partial funding for Ellie's procedure. It doesn't cover everything, but it's a significant portion. What about the remainder? Monroe asked. I might have a solution for that too, Emma interjected. My friend in the publicity department released Ellie's story to local media this morning, with all identifying details protected, of course. It's already gaining traction online. A local business owner has offered to organize a fundraiser. Monroe raised his eyebrows, impressed by his daughter's resourcefulness. You've thought of everything. Not everything, Emma admitted. Michael will need stable housing for Ellie's recovery. The guardianship petition is stronger with a permanent address. Before Monroe could respond, his phone rang. Captain Davis again. This time the conversation was brief and to the point. Monroe was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into his unauthorized involvement in an active family services case. His retirement process was officially on hold. When he returned to the room, Monroe found Michael reading to Ellie from The Little Engine That Could, his voice gentle as he repeated the famous refrain, I think I can, I think I can. For the first time since Monroe had found her under the bridge, Ellie smiled, a real smile that transformed her solemn face and briefly revealed the carefree child she might have been under different circumstances. The sight caught Monroe off guard, creating a lump in his throat. This moment, this simple, precious moment of a child finding joy despite everything, made his suspended retirement and threatened pension seem suddenly insignificant. Dr. Reed entered with her surgical team to explain the procedure to Ellie in child-friendly terms. They brought diagrams and even a doll to demonstrate what would happen, taking care to answer her questions honestly but gently. Will it stop the moving inside? Ellie asked, her hand instinctively going to her abdomen. Yes, Dr. Reed promised. After you heal, you won't feel that anymore. And will I have to go back under the bridge afterward? The innocent question hung in the air, breaking hearts around the room. Michael knelt beside her bed, his eyes level with hers. No, Ellie. Never again, I promise. Outside, the storm began to ease, rain softening to a gentle patter against the windows. Inside, the tension that had gripped Ellie's case for days similarly began to dissipate, replaced by cautious optimism and resolve. As evening fell, Monroe stood at the window watching the clearing sky, where the first stars appeared between parting clouds. Tomorrow would bring Ellie's surgery with all its risks and hopes. But tonight, for the first time, she slept peacefully, surrounded by people committed to her well-being, a bridge of humanity forming over the chasm of indifference that had nearly claimed her. Dawn broke over Children's Medical Center, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Monroe, who had spent the night in the visitor's lounge, stood at the window watching the city awaken. Today was Ellie's surgery, and perhaps the most consequential day of his career. His phone buzzed with a text from Captain Davis. Disciplinary hearing scheduled. For 10 a.m., attendance mandatory. The timing couldn't have been worse. Ellie's surgery was scheduled for 9 a.m., and he had promised to be there when they took her to the operating room. Breaking that promise wasn't an option, but neither was ignoring a direct order from his captain. Morning, Emma's voice came from behind him. She looked remarkably put together despite having slept in a chair. Bad news? She asked, noticing his expression. Monroe showed her the message. I can't be in two places at once. Emma considered the dilemma. If you miss the hearing, what happens? Best case? Retirement without honors. Worst case? Lose my pension entirely. The consequence of 30 years of service potentially erased in a single morning. Michael appeared from Ellie's room, his face tense with pre-surgery worry. "She's asking for you, Officer Monroe. They're preparing her now." Ellie's room. The atmosphere was charged with nervous anticipation. Medical staff moved efficiently around the small patient, who looked tiny and vulnerable against the white sheets. "You came," Ellie said when she saw Monroe, relief evident in her voice. "Of course I did." Monroe approached her. Bedside, his decision crystallizing with each step. Some promises transcended professional obligations. Some moments mattered more than pensions. "I'm scared," Ellie admitted, clutching her teddy bear. "That's okay," Monroe assured her. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means doing what you need to do even when you are scared." Dr. Reed entered, bringing a calm confidence that immediately shifted the room's energy. "We're ready, Ellie. Your job is just to sleep while we fix what's been bothering you." As the orderlies prepared to wheel her to surgery, Ellie suddenly reached for Monroe's hand. "Will you be here when I wake up?" she asked, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Monroe looked at his watch. The disciplinary hearing would be happening when Ellie emerged from surgery. His answer would determine not just Ellie's peace of mind, but the trajectory of his own future. "I promise," he said firmly, squeezing her small hand. "Some choices once made defined who you really were. I'll be right here waiting." Emma, watching from the doorway, saw something change in her father's face, a certain rigidity softening, replaced by absolute certainty. For the first time in years, she recognized the man she'd once adored as a child, the one who had seemed to disappear after her mother died. As they wheeled Ellie toward the elevator, Michael walking alongside, Monroe turned to his daughter. "I need to make a call." Outside, under a clear morning sky, Monroe contacted Captain Davis. The conversation was brief but definitive. He would not be attending the disciplinary hearing. Some bridges couldn't be uncrossed. Some decisions couldn't be unmade. This was one of them. The waiting room clock seemed frozen, each minute stretching like an hour. Monroe sat motionless, his empty coffee cup clutched in his hands, eyes fixed on the door leading to the surgical wing. Beside him, Michael paced restlessly, while Emma worked quietly on her tablet, occasionally making calls to update the growing community of supporters rallying around Ellie. "Surgery like this typically takes 4 to 6 hours, Emma reminded them gently. "It's only been 3. A sharp buzz from Monroe's phone broke the tense silence. Captain Davis again. "Disciplinary board has issued its decision in your absence. Report to precinct by end of day to surrender your badge and service weapon." Monroe read the message without reaction, then tucked the phone away. 30 years of service ended with a text message, yet somehow, sitting in that waiting room, it didn't seem to matter as much as it should have. "Dad?" Emma had noticed his expression. "Bad news?" "Just clarity," he replied, softly. "Sometimes you don't know what matters most until you're forced to choose." The surgery door swung open, and Dr. Reed appeared, still in her surgical scrubs. All 3 rose instantly, reading her face for clues. "Ellie made it through," she announced, her professional composure softening. With a smile. "It was complicated but successful. She's in recovery now." The collective release of breath was audible, like a wind sweeping through the small waiting room. "When can we see her?" Michael asked, his voice breaking with emotion. "Soon. She'll be groggy, but she's asking for her. Bear? And for you, Officer Monroe. She wanted to make sure you kept your promise." Ellie's recovery room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, pale but peaceful, with her teddy bear tucked securely beside her. Monroe sat in the visitors' chair while Emma and Michael had gone to get coffee. "You stayed," Ellie whispered when she opened her eyes, her voice raspy from the breathing tube. "I promised I would," Monroe replied softly. "Is the moving gone?" she asked, her hand hovering tentatively over her bandaged abdomen. "Dr. Reed fixed. It won't bother you anymore." Ellie's eyes drifted to the window, where sunshine streamed in. What happens now? Before Monroe could answer, Emma returned with Michael. A moment of understanding passed between father and daughter, something healing in their fractured relationship. Now, Emma said, sitting beside her father, we build something new. 3 months later, Monroe stood beside the Jefferson Bridge, watching as volunteers transformed the once desolate area into a children's playground and family resource center. The concrete pillars that had once sheltered the forgotten now supported colorful climbing structures and informational kiosks. What do you think? Emma asked, joining him with blueprints in hand. After Ellie's recovery, Emma had spearheaded this community project, channeling her administrative talents into something deeply personal. It's amazing, Monroe replied honestly. Since surrendering his badge, he'd found new purpose working with Emma's Foundation for Children in the system. Michael approached with Ellie walking carefully beside him. Her recovery had been challenging, but each day brought improvement. The haunted look in her eyes had been replaced by something brighter. Hope. Look what they're putting up. Ellie pointed excitedly to workers installing a sign near the entrance. Monroe read it aloud. Jefferson Bridge Children's Haven. For the children we didn't see until we learned how to look. Was I invisible before? Ellie asked, her innocent question carrying profound weight. No, sweetheart. Monroe knelt to her level. We just weren't looking properly. As dusk fell, lights illuminated the newly transformed space. Where darkness had once dominated, warmth now glowed. Monroe watched as Ellie explored her new surroundings, her laughter echoing against the bridge that had once been her only shelter. Some bridges connect more than just two sides of a river, Emma observed, standing shoulder to shoulder with her father. Monroe nodded, understanding she wasn't just talking about the concrete structure before them. The basis. Bridge between past and future, between broken and healing, between father and daughter, all were being rebuilt. One careful step at a time. The concrete is still old, Monroe said, touching a weathered pillar, still scarred by time and neglect. But now it supports something new, Emma finished. Proof that no beginning, no matter how broken, needs to end in darkness. As Ellie's laughter rang out once more, Monroe knew with certainty that some promises were worth any price, and that true bridges were built not of concrete and steel, but of compassion, courage, and love that refuses to look away.